this meeting of the Senate Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs. Nous commençons aujourd'hui notre étude du projet.
Today we will begin our study of Bill S10, an act to amend the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts.
This afternoon, to welcome back to the committee as our first witness on this important bill, the Honourable Rob Nicholson, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. As I say, welcome, Mr. Nicholson. I expect you have a statement for us.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'm pleased to be joined by Paul Saint-Denis and Catherine Kane of the Department of Justice. And as you say, I'm pleased to be able to make an opening statement. I think it was exactly a year ago that I appeared before this committee to discuss this bill, which is identical, the bill at that time, which is identical to the content of this bill. Je constate que le comité a tenu plus.
I note that the committee has already had several days of hearings on Bill C-15 and heard from a wide spectrum of witnesses.
Amendments that this bill proposes to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to address serious drug crimes in this country. Canadians want to be protected from offenders involved in serious drug crimes whose illicit activities, such as methamphetamine production and marijuana grow operations, threaten their safety and that of their families. Moreover, law-abiding Canadians are often the victims of drug gang turf wars. It's unacceptable that many Canadians feel too afraid to walk around in their own neighborhoods. The truth is, the problem stretches beyond our own borders. In fact, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime said earlier this week that drug trafficking and smuggling generates $120 billion a year, benefiting criminal and terrorist organizations all over the world, including Canada. We believe that protecting society from criminals is a core responsibility of the federal and provincial governments. The provinces have primary responsibility for policing, which is the front-line defense of citizens. The federal government assists the efforts of the police by financing through the RCMP many national police services and through such initiatives as the National Anti-Drug Strategy and the Aboriginal Justice Program. Only Parliament, however, has the power to make criminal law, to give the police the tools they need and to set penalties that those who choose to break the law face upon conviction. We believe that the protection of society demands that criminals serve serious time when they have committed serious crimes. And the crimes targeted by this bill, S10, such as trafficking, possession for the purposes of trafficking, production, importing, exporting, and possession for the purposes of exporting Schedule I drugs like cocaine and heroin, and Schedule II drugs like marijuana are serious crimes. And this is what this bill is about. And most Canadians would agree with us that drug producers and dealers who threaten the safety of our communities must face tough penalties. And the prison sentences for those who commit serious drug crimes need to reflect the level of threat these crimes pose to our society. S10 proposes an escalating scheme of mandatory prison sentences where there is an aggravating or safety factor. For example, if drug trafficking is carried out for organized crime purposes or a weapon or violence is involved, the offender would be sent to jail for at least a year. And if the drug is sold to youth or trafficking takes place near a school or an area normally frequented by youth, the offender would serve at least 2 years jail time. As well, drug producers would be sentenced to at least 3 years in jail where the production of the illicit drug constitutes a potential security, health, or safety hazard to children or a residential community. Overall, our government believes that our proposals represent a tailored approach to mandatory penalties for serious drug offenses. And since these proposed changes have been before this committee recently and were considered in detail, I won't go into further detail. However, I will address the amendments that this committee proposed last December and explain why the government has reintroduced the bill as it was passed by the House of Commons. The first amendment proposed by this committee would have changed one of the factors that would lead to a minimum one-year sentence for trafficking in a Schedule 1 or 2 drug. As passed by the House of Commons, the one-year mandatory sentence would apply to an offender who had been convicted or served a term of imprisonment within the previous 10 years. The amendment proposed would instead impose a mandatory penalty on an offender convicted of the offense in the past 10 years and who had been sentenced to 1 year or more for that offense. We believe that one prior conviction in the last 10 years for these serious offenses is sufficient to justify the mandatory penalty of 1 year in jail. The offender has obviously not amended his or her ways, and so a term of imprisonment should be imposed. The suggested requirement for a 1-year sentence for a prior offense could lead to multiple convictions, with the offender never facing the mandatory jail time. Moreover, the offender can avoid the mandatory penalty by successfully completing a drug treatment plan. That should be kept in mind. Your second amendment would have eliminated the mandatory term of imprisonment for a trafficker who has up to 200 marijuana plants. The House had already considered the issue and it had amended the former C-15 so that there would be an exemption for up to and including 5 plants. Having an exemption for up to 200 plants would, in our opinion, severely weaken the bill and invite traffickers to have multiple grow operations with less than 201 plants each to evade jail time. These other amendments that were proposed, I believe, are unnecessary. There is a provision for a review 2 years after the bill comes into force. Parliament can then decide after that review whether there is need for further amendments and for yet another review, but there's no need to mandate a review after 2 years and another after 5 years. While I understand the concerns surrounding Aboriginal offenders, the Criminal Code already directs courts to take into account their unique circumstances. And I would like to take this opportunity to point out that the government remains committed to supporting successful justice programs, such as the Aboriginal Justice Strategy, which committed $85 million towards Aboriginal community justice programs and achieves results in reducing and preventing crime in Aboriginal communities. We recognize that these programs do make a difference by helping to steer Aboriginal people away from a lifestyle of crime and help put an end to the cycle of violence. In conclusion, S10 is essential to enable law enforcement agencies to crack down on drug producers and dealers who threaten our children, neighborhoods, and communities. It's not intended to punish those addicted to drugs, but to send a message that the safety and security of Canadians remains among our government's most serious responsibility. I want to make it clear that the bill being tabled today is aimed at serious drug offenders, sending a clear message that grow ops, drug labs located in residential areas and selling drugs to youth, trafficking near schools will not be tolerated, and offenders will be punished with the appropriate jail time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, colleagues, we have, as usual, a limited time with the Minister, and so I'm going to ask everybody to be quite concise in your questions. We will begin with Senator Wallace, who's followed by Senator Carignan, Senator Lang, and Senator Baker. Senator Wallace.